What's the best example of instant karma you've witnessed? I've never been completely convinced that karma is real, but every once in a while something happens that's almost too perfectly timed to ignore. I have a relative by marriage who gives off major mean girl energy. She can be nice when she wants to be, but most of the time she's pretty condescending. She always seems to think she's the smartest person in the room and has a habit of making little passive-aggressive comments that get under people's skin. Nothing that's worth starting a family argument over, but enough that most people can only handle her in small doses. Last summer, a big group of us went on a family vacation. We spent the entire afternoon walking around the city, checking out shops, sightseeing, and trying different places to eat. By late afternoon, everyone was hot, tired, and ready to head back to the hotel to relax before dinner. Everyone except her. She and another relative wanted to keep exploring. Before we split up, she asked if I wanted to stay with them. I politely said no because honestly, I'd already had enough of her attitude for one day. As we started walking back, she laughed and made a comment about how everyone else was giving up too early. She acted like we were boring for wanting to relax instead of staying out longer. The rest of us didn't think much of it. We got back to the hotel, turned on the AC, changed into comfortable clothes, and spent the next couple of hours watching TV and hanging out in the lobby. Eventually, someone noticed how late it was. An hour turned into 2, then 3. By the time more than 4 hours had passed, people started wondering if something had happened. They weren't answering messages, and nobody had heard from them. Finally, the hotel doors opened, and the two of them walked in looking absolutely miserable. They were drenched in sweat, looked completely exhausted, and honestly seemed like they'd walked halfway across the city. Everyone immediately started asking questions. What happened? Did you guys get lost? Are you okay? She barely looked up and just said nothing. That was the entire explanation. She acted like they'd simply stayed out longer because they wanted to. Later that night, though, I ended up talking to the other relative who had been with her, and I found out what had actually happened. Apparently, they wandered much farther than they realized. At some point, they tried using their phones to get directions back to the hotel, only to realize neither of them had mobile data. They couldn't load GPS, couldn't call anyone, and didn't have enough cash to pay for a taxi. They figured they'd eventually recognize something familiar. Instead, they spent the next 4 hours walking around in the heat, asking random strangers for directions, taking wrong turns, and somehow getting even farther away. Meanwhile, the rest of us were back at the hotel, sitting in the air conditioning, eating dessert, and wondering where they were. The funniest part is that if the other relative hadn't told me the story later, I would have believed her nothing happened answer forever. She was way too embarrassed to admit they'd spent half the day completely lost. That got me thinking. How many moments of instant karma actually happen that nobody ever hears about? Most people aren't eager to tell everyone about the embarrassing consequences of their own decisions. They just quietly move on and hope nobody asks questions. Do I think the universe was punishing her for acting arrogant earlier that day? Probably not. She simply made a few bad decisions and paid the price for them. Still, I couldn't help but laugh at how perfectly everything lined up. She spent the afternoon making fun of everyone for heading back to the hotel early, only to spend the next several hours sweating, frustrated, and desperately trying to find her way back while the rest of us were relaxing in the AC. Whether you call it karma, coincidence, or just bad luck, it was one of those moments that felt almost scripted, and it's still the best example of instant karma I've ever witnessed.